Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moppin coming at you. We're taking a look at APUSH topic 4.2, taking a look at some of the domestic items surrounding the Jefferson presidency. And there are quite a few important trends that are going to be happening during this time period. Previously we talked about how the election of 1800 is going to be a revolution, if you will, in terms of a transfer of power from the Federalists to the Democratic Republicans. And so the question becomes, how revolutionary is this transfer of power going to be? We know that Jefferson was, theoretically opposed to, almost all of the Federalist policies, both foreign and domestic. But of course, that's on paper. That's when they're not in power. But in power, the question becomes, what will stay and what will go? Well, some interesting things that will stay is the fact that Jefferson will maintain his rival Alexander Hamilton's debt plans. In other words, we are still going to be continuing to fund the debt at par. Even more amazingly, we're also going to see the Bank of the United States still being maintained. The institution that Jefferson railed against, believing that it was unconstitutional, is still going to be around while Jefferson is president. And even though Jefferson was a small federal government guy, we're going to see that all, or just about all, of the bureaucratic positions that were created during the Washington and Adams administrations are going to also continue to be maintained. So, it's kind of interesting. Many would have thought that, Jefferson's going to come in and just radically change the federal government. And in many respects, not so much. That being said, though, there will be some changes. We will see a reduction in the size of the military. Remember, Jefferson, like many of his political stripes, are going to believe that a large military is going to be leading to domestic tyranny by the federal government. So that's going to be shrunk to a fraction of what it was, and it's also going to eliminate these various excise taxes, including the infamous whiskey tax that was the basis of the Whiskey Rebellion during the Washington administration. Now, that being said, Jefferson is going to be, focusing in mostly on the size of the government and, what to maintain, what to change. But then there's also something that's going to be striking his attention, and that is going to be Louisiana. Now, we mentioned previously that New Orleans down here, near the mouth of the Mississippi River, is a critical location for American trading. If you live west of the Appalachian Mountains, if you were in the Ohio River Valley or out here in what was the Great Northwest, you needed to use the Mississippi River, and specifically New Orleans, to be able to trade goods to the Atlantic coast. It was cheaper and faster to move goods down these rivers and around Florida to the East Coast than trying to trek across the treacherous Appalachian Mountains. And by the time we get to Jefferson's presidency, it is clear that New Orleans, now under the control of the French once again, New Orleans, as far as Jefferson was concerned, was something that had to become an American possession. That, in other words, American trade into the future could not be held vulnerable to a foreign nation controlling basically any kind of trade west of the Appalachian Mountains. So basically, we see, interest really growing to get into what's going to be Louisiana. Now, this is going to be happening at the same time as the resurgence of the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon, once again back at war with Britain and a number of other European countries, is going to be needing some money. And note, money to not just fight the British, but they're also kind of licking their wounds from the loss of Haiti, which had been, had become independent following a slave revolt there. So Napoleon has had a lot of military losses lately. He needs a lot of money to try to win on the continent of Europe. And so when America goes to France looking to maybe buy New Orleans, especially since it had been closed off to U.S. merchants in the last year, American diplomats are going to find that not only is Napoleon willing to sell New Orleans, he's willing to sell all of the Louisiana territory. He offers the entire Louisiana Purchase, which is what it will come to be called, all of this area in here, for just $15 million. And even if you adjust it, for inflation today, it is still going to be a steal, even at a modern price. So this shows you how little Napoleon really cared about the Western Hemisphere, at least in relation to what his European goals were. So this gets dropped in the lap of people like James Monroe and the other diplomats working there on behalf of the federal government. And so they write back to Jefferson, we've got a situation here. We have been authorized by Congress to buy New Orleans, but now we have an offer that's probably too good to be true, seemingly, to buy all of Louisiana. But here's the problem. Napoleon needs an answer pretty quick. These diplomats are far away. Congress is not in session and not close to being in session. And so it leads to a question for Thomas Jefferson. You know, small government, strict interpreter of the Constitution, Jefferson, as to whether or not he could, as the president, make a decision to just buy territory on his own without congressional approval. This was never something that was mentioned in the Constitution. There's nothing explicitly allowing the president to do this. And so this is really going to be, putting Jefferson to the test in terms of, it's one thing to kind of have your, principles on interpreting the Constitution, but then sometimes, there is an offer that you just can't turn down. And so when push comes to shove, as of course we know, Jefferson is going to take the deal. He is going to assert presidential control and just buy Louisiana. It gets purchased. And note what this means. Not only is this an expansion of presidential power, but much more significantly, this is going to dramatically change the map of the United States. We're going to basically double in size as a result of this land purchase. Now the United States is going to be extending not just to the Mississippi River anymore, but now all the way out to the Rocky Mountains. An unbelievably far distance if you are someone from, say Virginia, like Thomas Jefferson. It might as well have, bought land on the moon or something like that, or on Mars or something. That's, kind of how distant it seems from where you are. And as a result of this, Jefferson's popularity is going to increase. And Jefferson's going to be able to sell this, almost hasty acquisition of all of Louisiana as a way to kind of promote his vision for an agrarian America. If there was a concern of, is there enough land for all of these, small farmers that, Jefferson envisions kind of, representing America? Well, now there certainly is, no question about it. So Jefferson is going to become an even more popular president, especially amongst working class, white, rural Americans. And of course, wins for the Democratic Party, a Democratic Republican Party, are going to be losses for the Federalist Party. So this is going to be, still to this day, generally considered the most important of the achievements for Thomas Jefferson. And no, Jefferson's not going to be content with just saying he bought some land and then, someday we'll go see what we got out there. Jefferson was in many respects a Renaissance man as president. He wanted to know exactly what we now had. He was intrigued in terms of what the geography was like. He was intrigued in terms of what the natural wildlife was like. He was intrigued about, the native societies that were living there. And so we see this be the impetus for the famous Lewis and Clark expedition, which, basically goes and explores, what we have. And note that Lewis and Clark are not just going to sail up the Missouri River, as it will be called. They'll make their way all the way out to the Pacific Ocean to kind of see what the future of the hemisphere is all about. So, Jefferson is certainly forward-looking in terms of the future of America. He sees an America that very well could be going from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific, and the Louisiana Purchase is certainly a step in that direction. Now, on to other matters. Something else that is going to be a little bit more divisive than the purchase of Louisiana is going to be his attitude towards Federalists politically. We know that Jefferson railed against the Alien Sedition Acts that were put in place by the Federalists under the Adams administration. Those were allowed to expire under the Jefferson administration, and any of those that had been in jail for violating those laws were released. And so Jefferson, kind of puts to bed the legacy of what many still to this day consider to be a pretty abrasive, pretty aggressive restriction of the First Amendment. But he's not going to leave it at that. Jefferson, really had some beefs with some of these Federalists that were federal judges. For example, Justice Samuel Chase on the U.S. Supreme Court. He actually tries to get Chase removed. He actually gets Chase impeached, but there's not enough of a majority, a supermajority, that's able to actually remove Chase from office. So, one of the things that, we sometimes forget in terms of Jefferson, we know that Jefferson is the man that is the author of the Declaration of Independence, and we know that, he represents the idea of small American government, rural American economy, all that kind of stuff. But never forget that Jefferson is also, even though he's known to be a very quiet guy, he's a very passive guy. If you ever met him personally, he is a craven politician, no question about it. He is harsh. He is as partisan as it comes in some respects. So don't forget about that. But even in the midst of some fighting with the Federalists, the Louisiana Purchase acquisition and some victories against against pirates in the Mediterranean, the Barbary pirates, is going to help lead to Jefferson win re-election, win a second term by a pretty massive margin. And so I think we're going to leave it there for this video. Next time we're going to talk about the infamous Hamilton-Burr duel and the rise of John Marshall leading the U.S. Supreme Court. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.